Langston Hughes. Me and Langston Hughes have a few things in common. We both from Cleveland, Ohio. He also went to the same middle school I went to, which was Central Middle School. And he's also a poet. So he has a passion for poetry. I have a passion for poetry. We grew up in similar environments and went to the same school as well. So that's how me and Langston Hughes connect. Now I have Ghetto therapy that's inside of the Langston Hughes Cleveland Clinic facility, which I don't believe is a coincidence. I believe that I'm walking in his path and continue to do great things for the community. So that's how me and Langston Hughes have a connection. I go by Walter Patton, the creator of Ghetto Therapy. That's an open to the public therapy session. Our target is impoverished communities. Okay, so we target communities that go through the most, that have the most social determinants, whether it's lead poison, food deserts, from school to prison pipeline. So we target those communities. And Central, the community where I'm from, where we call the Down the Way Projects, has the lowest income for the average resident with under $10,000 a year in the city of Cleveland. So these are the communities that we target. And I also created Create Art Not Violence, which is a youth initiative for kids that's going through trauma as well. We utilize all forms of art, whether it's poetry, hip hop, arts and crafts, or film. So those are two programs that I created. And again, I'm Walter Patton. So I would first like to start off by taking you back to 2005. 2005 was my senior year in high school. I had a best friend by the name of Leonard Penson. Leonard Penson was a good kid. When stuff happened to people tragically, we always say that people are good, and we don't ever talk about the stories that probably put him in that position. But he was really a good kid. And in 2005, he played basketball for East Tech. But he was from the Garden Valley Projects. And inside the Garden Valley Projects, if you know anything about the Central community, then you know these neighborhoods feud. So he called me one day. He said, "Walt, I want to go to this party." I said, "Leonard, you be careful going to that party because you know the rival neighborhood gonna be there." And he like, "Well, I play basketball. I don't think nobody gonna bother me or nothing like that. Everybody know who I am and what I do." I said, "Cool, just be careful." So I get a call at about 7 or 8 from one of my peers, and they say, "Walt, Leonard just got shot." So the first thing I do when I heard he got shot was I called his phone immediately. I called his phone 10 or 20 times, no answer. And of course, I couldn't be at the party because I just had my first kid at 17. So I was in the house babysitting my daughter. So I tell my mom, I say, "Ma, they say Leonard got shot." She dropped her phone, she started crying. We picked my daughter up and took her back to her mom's house. When I get to the hospital in Metro, the entire Garden Valley is inside the lobby. So they in there crying, screaming, everybody in there talking back and forth. Everybody's angry. And an hour into my visit there, a doctor comes out and say, Leonard was pronounced dead. I know he was shot in the head. And just a sad day, man. Even when we went back to school, we went back to East Tech, they had the obituary all on his locker. Everybody was signing the obituaries and things like that. And I can remember vividly an activist that was doing the work at the time when I was 17 years old, talking about basically it was our fault. He kept pointing the fingers. It's the weed y'all smoking. It's the music y'all listening to. And at this time, we grieving. We like, bro, we didn't do it. Like, we just here grieving. How is this helping us? So I made a promise to myself that whenever I got in a position to talk to youth affected by gun violence or lost close friends at an early age to gun violence, that I wasn't gonna point the fingers. I was gonna do the research. So I started doing the research. And the first thing I found was called redlining. Now redlining, if you're looking on a map or your phone, if your phone got a map on there, the red line indicates communities of poverty. So when you out of town or anywhere, if you see a red line on the map, that's telling you this community face all these social determinants of health. And it's basically telling you not to go there. So what caused red line? And I wanted to get deeper, like how does this red line get on this part of the map for this certain community? And I found something else called Public Works Administration. And what that is in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt created that Public Works Administration. And what it did was cause segregation amongst blacks and whites. Because in the 30s, in Cleveland, blacks and whites was kind of on the same playing field. We stayed in the same communities. But when Franklin D. Roosevelt passed this Public Works Administration, what that did was give the white Americans business and home loans to move in suburban communities like Parma, Solon, North Olmsted, giving them homes for like $300,000, but for cheap, so they can create generations of revenue, generations of wealth. And those same business and home loans for the white Americans, he denied the black Americans, leaving us in that same community. We lost mom and pop stores. We lost factory jobs. We lost community gardens. We lost grocery stores. I mean, the community became extremely violent. And when I was reading Langston Hughes' autobiography, he talks about redlining in his autobiography because he lived in the same community. And he talked about how he had Polish friends, Irish friends, but once this passed, he lost those friends. And my great-grandmother, Walter Patton, who's resting in heaven now, she talked about the same thing, but she just didn't know the name for it. So yeah, so the Public Works Administration created poverty inside of black communities, as you see today in Cleveland. Like my community, the Central Community, as we call it, Down the Way Projects, has one of the lowest income rates in America. So they say, well, that was in 1933. How is it relevant today? How is redlining and Public Works Administration relevant today? So I'll tell you. One day I was pulling up at home, and a couple of the older women or older men in the community told me to talk to this young guy named James. Now, James was in Create Art Not Violence. He's one of the kids that I thought was one of the best kids inside the program. But they said, Walt, can you talk to James because James is terrorizing the community? Now, James is 4'11". I'm thinking, like, how is James terrorizing the community? So I pull up on James. I say, James, what's going on? Why everybody keep telling me to talk to you? And he laughed in my face because that's kind of the relationship we had. He laughed at me. He said, Walt, it's where I stay. And at the time, he thought he was saying something so small, but to me, it was so big because I knew exactly what he was talking about from me living right next door to James and me studying the Public Works Administration. So directly across the street from me and James' apartment, there's a vacant grocery store. It's been vacant for 4 years. I lost 3 friends in 2020 to hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease due to the structured way we eat. We have no access to fresh produce, no access to fresh meats, no access to anything fresh for 4 years in a row. So this is what's going on in the Central Community, and they consider that to be a food desert. And then I thought about it because directly next door to me and James in 2021, it's a young lady who comes out the house crying and screaming. As a community, we hear it. It's 6, 7 in the morning. She's crying and screaming. About 10 of us come out as a community. We come to see what's wrong. Some of us being nosy, but we wanted to see what was wrong. And she's screaming. She said, my baby is not waking up. My baby is not waking up. And we said, what's wrong? What's wrong? Come to find out, the baby had died from SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And sudden infant death syndrome can come from various reasons, but it also comes from poor dieting and a stressful environment. So in this environment, in the Central Community where James say it's his community, we have a food desert and a high infant mortality rate. In 2018, we had an infant mortality rate of 22%. That's 22% of our babies in Central dying before the age of 1. So that's the community we live in. These are red line communities. And then I thought, James live in this environment and it's only one high school. But I say that because our second high school, which was Jane Addams, our one high school that is East Tech, Jane Addams was closed in 2019. But why I say that is because surrounded by this one high school is 8 prison-based facilities. You got the 34th and 55th halfway house that brings home returning prisoners. You got the 3rd and 4th district. That was the holding facilities where, you know, the 3rd and 4th district cops are. So that's 4. Then we have the 90th Justice Center, which is directly down the street for the youth. Then we have the Adult Justice Center that's downtown. Then we have directly across from the 34th halfway house is the women's prison. And then we have the CMHA headquarters. Those are 8 prison-based facilities, all within 10 minutes driving. You can get to each one driving within 10 minutes, surrounded by this one high school. So I was doing a study on this lady named Toni Preckwinkle. If you can look up Toni Preckwinkle, she's an educator and a politician from Illinois. And she has this study that says that in all public schools across America, if your kid can't read by the time they're in 3rd grade, chances are they're going to go to prison. So they're building prisons based off of 3rd grade reading scores. And you say, that's just a statistic. How is that true? Well, it takes me back to James. James constantly getting suspended. I asked his mother, I said, why is James keep getting suspended? She said, Walt, James can't read. She said every time he's called upon to read, he's smacking kids in the head. He's throwing paper to get the attention off of he can't read. And James is in prison today. He's right down on 90th and Quincy, one of the prisons I was talking about for the youth. So he was in the 3rd grade at the time I asked him this. And he told me it was his environment. So that's the statistics itself. So I started thinking about how can I create solutions. Living in this redline community with a food desert, with the from school to prison pipeline, man, there's just so many social determinants inside of this community, just living there and seeing it. I said, how can I create a solution? So I started to think about therapy services, right? So I'm thinking like, we did a lot of the smoking, we did a lot of the drinking, the problems never go away just for the moment, but when you come back sober, what else? After seeing all of this, with James seeing with the infant mortality, the food desert, and some school to prison pipeline, I thought about calling therapists. I called a couple therapists because I'm on a board of charity, residence board. So I emailed a few therapists, they all got back with me, and we started to build. So I told them what I wanted to do in 2020. I started bringing licensed therapists on board. So in 2021, we finally worked together. I had a Reiki therapist, which is Shannon Yarbrough. She came in and she also does sound bowl. At first, it started off at about maybe 10 or 15 people weekly, but it started to grow weekly. So now we do Reiki at Ghetto Therapy, we do sound bowl, we do traditional, we got a meditation specialist, we got a yoga specialist, and we also do foot detoxing and massage therapy. So that went from 10 to 15 residents to 50 to 60 roughly residents every week. And our largest day was a couple weeks ago inside of the Cleveland Clinic Langston Hughes facility, which is where we're at now. We had 101 residents. So 101 residents coming to a therapy session. Ghetto Therapy is beginning to grow. And this is what we mean by creating solutions inside of the redline community. And that's one thing that I focus on. And I always say that it's never the youth fault or anybody growing up in these impoverished, dangerous communities. It's never their fault that they was placed there due to their income. But it becomes their fault once they get the information and still choose to be destructive. So Ghetto Therapy serves as a solution. Create Art Not Violence serves as a solution. And I just wanted to talk about redlining communities and the things that we're creating to combat redlining. Walter Patton.
I don't say much, but on the track I open up just like an RTA bus. When it come to rap, I'm the one that they afraid of. Be yourself, that ain't true, like filters and makeup. Y'all should wear with black with locks, it's time that we wake up. And he had that skin that looked just like mine. He spoke words like me and walked combined. Trying to say his skin was white as chalk this time. That's after they came out the mountain to caucus high. Y'all keep lying, but y'all niggas getting caught this time.
Anybody's on coalition with anybody that has revolution on their mind. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You got to make a distinction.
Look, I'm just a black boy blinded by red lines. Now every single day they got our face on the headlines. Another black boy shot another black boy in the head. You can't tell that kid's affected by lead. Look how that kid reacting when the drama's intense. Shooting at his ops like he ain't got no common sense. You see them boys in the shy, all they lead levels high. See, they never really cared, cause they ain't afraid to die. They homicides up, they won't hesitate to smoke you. Lead poison is what created the drill culture. Ain't no guns on safety.
How does he get the
got
word?
ADHD. Eating
What
paint
made
chips, that's
Franklin
what drove us
Roosevelt
all
a great
crazy.
leader
Now they got me tapped in.
was
Attack
his
on the black
visionary
man. The
ability
government been
to make the
structured
case for his
kill us
ideas.
off back then. Roosevelt wrote legislation, took our resources. We don't want to kill each other, the government forced us. I'm just a black boy blinded by red lines. Now every single day they got our face in the headlines. I'm just a black boy blinded by red lines. Now every single day got our face on the headlines. I'm just a black boy blinded by red lines. Every single day they got our face on the headlines. I'm just a black boy blinded by red lines.